order and get started. We're going to try for these meetings to start and end on time. We are planning on ending at 5:30. We'll talk a little bit more about one of the things that managing expectations. We will end with unfinished business. This is a long process. This is not a one and done. As we've noted, we've got 3 meetings already scheduled with 2-week increments between them. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. I just wanted to, first of all, eliminate the introductions because there's a list of people with their introductions on the pages. If you need any of those, we have some extras. Their names and affiliations are on the name placards that you can see. So we will spare that time and be hopefully focused on that. But I can't thank you all enough, not only the people sitting around the table. I'm confident that this is maybe the broadest representation of our community that we've had in a room, from business owners and residents and organizational leaders and aldermen, NOAA, Corps of Engineers, as an example, individuals throughout the community representing all different segments of our community as well. So we have a couple that haven't gotten here yet. They may be showing up any minute. I think Colonel Stadinger was the lead and got through it, and then they're following behind to catch up, getting over the edge. But we're delighted to have all of you here, and thank you all very much. Also, thank you all of these that are around the room. We are delighted by the turnout. This is obviously an important discussion for our entire community. As we move into second and alternate additional sessions, we'll look at finding a place with a little more seating as well. So thank you for your patience and understanding. Also, this is maybe the largest group of participants at the tables that we've had in a group before, and it takes up quite a bit of space. We're going to be also, as we move forward, again, want to thank you all for what you're doing, but more importantly, this is a big issue. And as we talked about, this has a variety of initiatives that we're going to be dealing with. Again, managing your expectations. We're not going to get done today. We're not going to talk about funding. And actually, we're not going to talk about a wall today or not a wall today. There's factors that we need to discuss. And the idea is to come up with all the steps and information this group needs and the community at large needs to end up making a decision of what we're going to do in the future. So you're going to find some interesting people, some interesting information. I was able to hear Mr. Wolf's presentation from the National Weather Service, because one of the things we'll be discussing down the road is we protect to what level and what can we anticipate in the future and what that's going to look like. Issues related to, as we talked about before, today we're going to be focusing on what do we protect and how do we prioritize how we protect that collaboratively and working together as a team. And we'll talk about that, and that'll be our first working session as we move forward. In addition, as we looking at what levels we plan for, that's the second step. We'll be dealing in that more in 2 weeks. The plan of the 2-week breaks, there's people, this is not designed to have a lot of questions and answers from the public. But really, we feel pretty happy and satisfied with this. We've got a representation of the public here, but the 2-week windows are to give you feedback if you have something a question that wasn't asked, information you still need. You can get a hold of any one of these that represent, I would guess every one of you are represented by someone at this table or multiple people at this table. So please feel free to connect with any of us if you have more information that you want to share. Nothing ultimately goes on without everything being done here in public in this room. There won't be more stuff happening somewhere else. It'll all be happening here. In addition, we have to discuss, so first, what are we going to protect and what's the priorities protection that we're looking at for our city? We're going to get some information about our current floodplain in just a moment. Secondly, again, as I mentioned, at what levels do we need to anticipate in the future? And what type of flood protection do we provide? The third is what are some mitigation, resiliency, the type of other things that we can deal with here, the roles of flood resilience, water holding areas, Nahan Marsh, all of those will be factored into this as well. It's not just one thing, it's a variety of things. We'll be discussing that over the time of this, in this whole sessions that we're going to be doing. Also, after we look at all that, we also want to consider what are the opportunities and challenges that the Canadian Pacific Railroad gave to us. Are there some opportunities there? Are there some challenges? Yes, and we've got a team working on that already. But how does that factor into the long-term plans as well? Once we've had that discussion and those discussions and got information, then we will look at what collection of options can be developed to address flooding and flood protection. Come on in here. Is that Dennis? Hey, Dennis. There you go. What flooding and flood protection, the development of world-class riverfront, all of this factors in. Also the environment and the protections of the environment and the Mississippi River corridor and a vibrant, resilient, and residential business area. So none of those are left out. It's a matter of how do they all fit together and looking at a grander plan that deals with all of those. Once we discuss that, then it's funding options. Because we can't decide what we're going to fund until we decide what it is we're funding. And what are the opportunities of collection of things that we can put together to do that. And cost will be one of those things under funding, but also we're going to hear as time goes on, what are limitations that are federal, state, for instance, Corps of Engineers, FEMA, Homeland Security, all of those organizations have limitations. This is what we will fund, and this is what we don't fund. And it's important to know that is, because whatever we don't collaboratively be able to fund at the state or federal level falls on the taxpayers in Davenport. And can we make that happen? So those are some of the issues that we're going to deal with. And I think there's a point at which, where as a group, we're going to start to see, and I want to introduce Fred Smith. He is a professional facilitator. He's done a number of our organizations, and I just want to share as a Davenport resident, he's agreed to do this for free. So I want to thank him for that as well. And I keep asking him, and he keeps saying yes, so I'm going to keep asking him. He's done a number of these. But I think it's important to have somebody help us with that process, because there's a lot of different views, a lot of different positions in place. So whenever we heard, but at the same time, we need to come to some resolute direction that we can follow. And many of you I've talked to, I don't want to be on a group that just talks about something and doesn't do anything. If we're going to do that properly, we've got to, in fact, have all the facts going into it. There's a lot of people with ideas right now, but they don't have really all the conditions that are involved. We want to make sure. So as an example, which many times I'm not sure if the U.S. Postal Service has been included, but they have a major facility that was impacted. We got Mid-American Energy and the work that you do, all the electric work under the riverfront. We got people with businesses along the riverfront. We got businesses and individuals who live south and west of our community as well. So I just want you to know this is a representation of literally from one end of the riverfront, 9 miles, all the way to the other end. And we have to understand we got to take care of everybody from the riverfront all the way up to the northern borders of Davenport, because they are parts of the flood issues that deal with every one of them. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So I'm not going to talk anymore, but I think it's important that we take a look at that. And there's a point at which where we as a group may say, here's the issues, what we want to do. We're going to need really outside, some internal, maybe some external, additional professional services to chart out the plan. It's stuff that the Corps of Engineers do every day. There's something that company, we're going to look at all of those factors. We're not going to end up coming with this is what it's going to look like and this is how it's going to be engineered. We're going to need more resources. So when that happens, we're going to group to say, okay, this is what we wanted to happen. Now let's find somebody that can actually put it together professionally, give us an idea of not only what it can look like, but what the costs are going to be to make that happen. Okay? Just with that involved, again, I'm going to just keep moving us along here because I think it's important. We have a lot of very busy people, the ones sitting at the table and the ones sitting around the outside. So again, we're going to end at 5:30, and we've got another one coming up between another hour and a half and then another hour and a half, and as long as it takes us to be able to go through all the information that we have. Okay? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our city administrator, who's going to go through our current flood plan, and Robin Dunn is also going to add to that to give us some ideas of what it is now. And many of you asked, so what can we expect moving forward? Because we very well may experience high water again before a big plan like we're anticipating here can be put into action. So what you can anticipate, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit now. Corey.
Who's driving? Robin or Robin? All right. I'm sorry. Oh, no, you're good. All right. So the first two slides, they're consistent with what was presented at the community meetings in March. And you all have the handouts, so I'm not going to read them in their entirety. But a couple of the quick points are that the purpose of the flood plan is to protect the city's assets, be it infrastructure, utilities, all those kinds of things, to maintain mobility around the city, to ensure that we're safe, and to educate property owners. And that's part of some of our FEMA work that we have to do, is we have to do a lot of outbound education. The second one, again, you can read it, but basically the flood plan as a document is a flexible document, and it is situation dependent. The flood we faced this year, we've never seen before. The three crests, the height. So it needs to be able to constantly ebb and flow to what's happening on the ground as we go, and it does that. So the flood plan document itself, it is an emergency preparedness document, which means it's a protected document. Some of you in this room may have asked for it. We have politely said we won't give it to you because it is protected. It's hundreds of tasks and thousands of data points down to what pumps get placed where, at what height, and who's manning them. From an emergency management standpoint, we can't have that information out in the public because it's about the larger community's safety. But trust that it is a massive, massive document that staff goes through line by line as we begin fighting the flood. The hallmark of the document is really about protecting public assets and critical infrastructure. So this just highlights a lot of what the plan covers, and I'll give you a little cheat for some of the work you're about to do. Some of this slide might come in handy for what you talk about protecting. But it's a ton of parks, it's a ton of facilities, it's a ton of major infrastructure. The streets and sewer systems alone are massive infrastructure systems. And specifically on those, so the water pollution control plan. As we were getting ready for the crest, sitting at SEC, and Dave's shaking his head right now because he was there that day with us, that was our number one concern, was the viability of the water pollution control plan. Because not only does it serve the city of Davenport, it serves 3 other communities in our region on the Iowa side. If we lose that plan, everyone has a bad, bad, bad day. So making sure we could maintain that asset was really important. Secondly, streets. Preserving access to the Arsenal Bridge and Centennial Bridge, as well as a lot of that east-west mobility downtown. Really important part of the plan. And the same, you saw us put the temporary walls up in the East Village for the first time in a really long time. Protecting 11th Street was important. Being able to have people move through the city during times of flood is one of the critical things the plan focuses on. A couple just fast facts about it. So at 24 feet, when the river level reaches 24 feet, it impacts 740 property owners, or private properties, of the 42,000 in Davenport. So it'll give you just a little context of when the river comes up that far, we are a very large city. Our current flood plan, and we faced it this year, maxes out our operational capacities. And we forewent a lot. There was a huge opportunity cost this year, both from parks and public works. We gave up a lot of programmings because we couldn't either get to facilities or they were flooded out. And public works, given the staff that was working in the field, couldn't do what was their normal jobs. And I think you saw that toll taken on our infrastructure in the form of potholes and other things, because the staff was really focused down here. So to grow the current plan, something will need to give from an operational perspective. And then the last part is our flood plan is dependent on the government bodies above us. We have a state and a federal government that says here are the things you can and can't do, or should and shouldn't do, and in some cases how you must do them. So the flood plan takes into account FEMA, Homeland Security, and some of those other organizations that provide jurisdiction to us. From a staff standpoint, what are we doing? What's next as you take on this journey? We've already started the 360 review. So once we got under 13 feet, even though we popped back up for a little bit, we've started looking at every one of those tasks to say, what did we learn? Things we've already started to talk to the council about specifically, if we're going to do the L configuration or the double stack, which we did for the 3rd crest, removing some of the medians in River Drive becomes something we would like to explore from both a safety and just a logistical asset standpoint. So you've probably heard us start talking with the council about some of those things. we're already addressing some of those. What the ultimate solution in the flood plan is, we don't know yet, but we'll continue to do that review. The Corps of Engineers, when we get the final report about the barrier breach or the breach that we faced, releasing that. So once we have those findings, we'll be sharing that. We've been working with Dave and his team on the Scott County Hazard Mitigation Plan. What is that? That is the living document which all FEMA funds really flow through. And so it's standard practice to update that about every 5 years. We're in that update cycle right now. We need to review it annually, which we will and do. But we've worked with both the county and Bi-State, who helps us facilitate this, to say, we're about to embark on a journey that's probably going to give us some new answers than the ones we have today. Can we come back in a year or two and add new projects to it? And they said absolutely. So what you're doing now will be added to what we've been working on for a little while. And then lastly, this link is here for you because it's kind of fun when you're not here to go play around with. But I'm going to have Robin talk a little bit. So we have flood inundation maps that shows exactly at which foot of river height what parts of the city are impacted. So it's kind of fun to see. But Robin is way savvier than I am about what these maps mean and what we do with them.
Brian's gonna help me. Because of our situation.
Can't be in two places at once.
There's not a lot of room back here, guys. Awesome. Okay, so again, I'm Robin. Brian's gonna help me navigate here a little bit. I'm actually gonna take the floodplain because, again, as Corey mentioned, we're several hundred line items of actions that actually happen. In some locations, there might be a lot of actions that happen at 13 feet, and we may not have to do other actions until 17, 18, or 19 feet again. So again, all across the city, basically our flood plan starts at 13 feet. There are some things that actually happen just at those very early stages, and again, carry on throughout. Going from east to west, South Concord is actually one of the lower spots of our city. We will have South Concord, portions of that road will actually become covered with water at about 13.5 feet. We will actually start closing parts of South Concord at 14 feet, obviously for public safety, vehicle transportation, and all of that kind of thing. At 14.5, water continues to encroach on the road, so we'll again continue to kind of close that road off. At that point, we have a lot of residents that do live down there. We make arrangements to actually have dumpsters set in different locations, so they're still able to actually access their properties, live there, and that kind of thing. And then we actually have dumpsters at a remote location so that they can go ahead and drop off garbage, all of those kinds of things. Obviously, that critical piece of infrastructure that we talked about earlier is the water pollution control plant. We actually will lose road access to the water pollution control plant at 19.5 feet. We do have a way that we can get in there for transportation to continue the 24/7 operation that is required at the plant up until about 20.5 feet. At that point in time, we actually have staff who volunteer from anywhere to a 5-day to a 7-day basis to sleep at the plant. They actually have a shift of 4 to 5 during the day and 5 at night. So they'll have the day shift runs and operates the plant during the day, they sleep at night, and then the other shift will come on. They're then relieved. Obviously we stock them with groceries, sleeping, arrangements, all of those kinds of things are taken care of. When that happens at the wastewater treatment plant, we have to also house people at the compost facility. And an essential part of processing wastewater is that we have biosolids that also have to be processed at the same time wastewater is. So there are people that are also lodging at the compost facility to treat biosolids at the same time we're still treating wastewater. So again, that's really what kind of happens at that 21.5. They are going to continue processing. There are some things that we learned, and you'll see that in some of the hazard mitigation, I think, actions that you guys are going to discuss later on. We're looking at some different ways that we can relieve pressure on the system at some of the higher river levels that we saw most recently. Excuse me. But also, this is obviously a critical facility. We do not actually have any flood protection around it, and that is something that is one of the projects that we'd like to have looked at up to at least a 28-foot flood stage. We can actually continue processing wastewater at the plant until 24 feet. At 26 feet, some of our tanks and digesters actually then become inundated by river water if we do not have any flood protection around that particular facility. The compost facility actually does have permanent berms up with, basically, if you've ever been down to a compost facility, you see the berms on the side and you've got the entrance. So we just have to block off that entrance when the rivers comes up. But we do actually have a back portion, now that we have kind of a conveyance system between wastewater and compost facility that's been new in probably the last 3 to 4 years. We do actually have a back section of those two properties that needs to have some flood protection also. So again, that's kind of the stuff that happens down at our compost facility, South Concord wastewater treatment plant. Then you want to head over to Garden and Western. What river levee did that on? Did you want to give them what a 24-foot look like there? So this is kind of 24 foot in this particular residential area. 24 feet, we're really kind of looking at what that looks like on, we do actually have a bridge over Black Hawk Creek. We're really right at the bridge deck right there at about 24 feet in this particular area. The dike that protects this area, this is not what happens. This is a flood inundation map. So again, this is a representation of where water would go if the dike that exists in the Garden Addition and the Western Addition, which is on the other side of the creek, did not exist. This is where water would reach. So basically the dike holds back the water, but at 13 feet in this particular area, you're gonna have water that actually starts coming up storm drains and things like that. Because when the creek reaches a certain height, then it starts backing through the storm drains. And you'll find that happening all over the city as we continue to talk through this flood plan. Oftentimes we're putting in flood protection not because the river's reached us yet, but because we've got water coming out of the storm drains. So at varying levels of river stage, there are a variety of gates that get closed in this area. There are a variety of pumps that get set. Just a variety of different things, and those will happen in between. You've got those early actions that happen at 13 feet. There'll be a couple more that happen at 16, a couple more that happen at 18. So again, as that water creeps up those storm lines, that's where we're setting those pumps, closing those gates, and all of those kinds of things. There is actually a soil levee that is actually built across the railroad track at a 21-foot level to protect to around for anything that's going to be above that 22.7, 23-foot river level. Because essentially what will happen is the river, again, it'll find a way, and it's gonna find a way based on elevations and things like that. So there is actually a soil levee that we do have to construct so that the water doesn't come back around and get that particular area from a different direction, essentially. So again, that dike's been there for 40, 50, I haven't done the math yet, 70 years. 65, yeah. So, been there for a while. It does need to have a little bit of TLC. So again, those are gonna be some of those things that are on your guys' list to discuss as well. So why don't you go ahead and head down, just drive down River Drive just a little bit, Brian. So again, we're getting a little bit closer, maybe bring in Credit Island a little bit, can you? Yeah, not that far. So we've got Credit Island Base Shop, a variety of businesses that actually live on the other side of Credit Island. We do provide sandbags and sand to those residents and those businesses that are looking for that kind of assistance. Obviously at Credit Island, being now that it is a little bit flood resistant now, obviously the electrical's been elevated. We're allowing that facility to flood. They do, it's a lot of minor things like making sure the septic system is taken care of, plugging toilets, making sure that picnic tables are moved, making sure that any kind of equipment or anything like that that's on the lowest levels of that facility are elevated or removed from the island. So the bulk of that kind of work is actually going to happen between that 14 and 15 and a half river stage, because at 15 and a half we're not able to actually access the road again. It's really not going to reach that facility until about 18.5. But again, for public safety and our own employee safety, you don't want to have people driving through 3 foot of water if it's even possible. and you don't really want to necessarily be boating, unless you have to. So again, a lot of those actions actually have to happen, much earlier, and we have to do that based on whatever that predicted river level is. And actually, that makes me think about Mayhat Marsh, which is down by wastewater treatment plant or the water control plant and compost facility. Because we lose those roads at 19 and a half, we really have to be monitoring those river levels, because that facility is actually impacted at about 22 and a half feet. So we have to get the 2,000 sandbags that they need in there before we lose that road. So again, Jessica's been awesome, by the way, throughout this entire, Jessica and Dave both. We relied a lot on the information that they were providing to us so that we could time some of those supplies and that equipment going into those locations timely. So go ahead and drive River Drive a little bit farther. So go to Division and Marquette. Or Division and River Drive. And then we'll go to Marquette. Okay, you got it up there? Okay, so you got Division. Go ahead and put your river up there. A little bit farther. Okay, so basically, when we're closing River Drive, that area that's by Credit Island is actually a little bit more elevated, and it actually doesn't need to be closed until a little bit later. But we've got some low spots underneath the railroad bridge by Howell. And so we actually will do some pumping at that particular location. And we start to get impacted at about 17 and a half, 18 feet at that intersection of River Drive and Division. So again, when that kind of stuff happens or whatever, that's when we start to begin to see the full sections of River Drive being closed. And so we'll go ahead and go to Marquette. So Marquette's kind of one of those funny, odd places. Also, there are actually like 10 line items at this particular location, because it all depends on river level and what we're gonna do there. Actually, water will start coming out of the catch basins at that location at 15.41 feet. We cannot hold that intersection open past 18 feet. So if Monday, it's gonna be 15.41 feet, and there's no prediction for an 18-foot flood, we'll actually pump and keep that section open and keep River Drive open. But if it's Monday at 15.41 feet and Wednesday it's gonna be 18 feet, we're not gonna do anything. It's a waste of resources. There's no reason to actually put a pump in there to keep that road open for 2 additional days. So once that Marquette intersection closes and Division closes, then you start to see the left part of River Drive close. Myrtle, as far as what do you want to talk about?
Myrtle's actually a little bit lower, but the storm system from Myrtle goes west to Marquette, so you're actually keeping both of those open.
Right. And then Marquette, our Marquette facility is down back by, just adjacent to the Veterans Memorial Park, where the drop-off recycling is and that kind of thing. That particular facility is actually accessed. We have an agreement with a chemical company along River Drive so that we can access the back part of that property, because we can't actually reach that area until about 23 feet. We do use that particular facility for a lot of equipment storage. All of that equipment will come out if we're looking at something where we're not going to be able to get back in there, or if we're looking at, say, 26-foot flood, equipment would be moving regularly out of that particular building. And then basically, we're at Modern Woodman Park then, essentially. Again, we start basically our flood, and Brian, 20 feet's pretty good there. So basically here, 16 and a half feet, again, it's that storm drain. It's gonna start coming out of that storm drain at about 16 and a half feet. So that's when if we're gonna get something that's over 17 and a half feet for a flood, they're gonna have to start staging that material and getting it out. The other part of it is, we have to time that with Marquette, because all of the flood walls are in that building that's on Marquette. So if we're closing the Marquette facility, or we're not gonna keep Marquette open, we have to get everything out from Modern Woodman Park before we let that intersection go. So everything that's going to happen at Modern Woodman Park, again, all that stuff is kept at our Marquette facility. That flood protection at the actual height of the walls there are something that we would like to have looked at, because the height is 24 feet. So if you look at a more significant flood, we'd need to be looking at some additional flood protection at that particular location. Obviously, we're pretty efficient at putting those flood walls in. There are a couple of places at that particular location that We have to actually use some other things besides the flood walls that makes us a little less efficient, and we'd like to make some other improvements. And then again, with the rail, we're really not sure what that access looks like anymore, how that's going to change some of the other things that we do as far as flood protection goes at that particular facility. And then I guess we'll head east then, a little bit farther. You wanna check your gains? Okay, good job. 21 feet. So gains basically, at about 21 feet, we're gonna start having issues with water and we have to close off Second Street. So I know that you guys will have some conversations at some point, you know, about, well, why don't they put stuff down all the way the other west section of Gaines Street or of the Centennial Bridge or Modern Women Park? Again, we start playing games with water then, you know, because essentially if you're gonna do that there, you still have storm drains on all of the streets above that. So you start placing pumps, placing gates, placing HESCOs or whatever kind of flood protection you want to, and essentially you're chasing water throughout the entire area as the river comes up. Of course, you could look at something that's a little bit different, where you've gated everything off and you're putting lift stations in or something like that. But again, your challenge is also going to be is every time you close gates and you set pumps, you have a 3-inch rainfall in 1 hour, it would have probably been for naught. Because you're gonna have flash flooding, because that water has nowhere to go. So anytime you're setting those gates or you know, closing those gates or setting pumps, rain becomes an issue, every which way around. Let me see here. So yeah, so we've got obviously our Bethel Park to Perry HESCO configuration. Again, more discussion to happen on that. Medians coming out would make us a little bit more efficient in doing the flood protection in that particular location. One thing to know, when we do actually set the L configuration, we basically we're guaranteed to lose essentially 73 HESCOs, or about $30,000 every time we do it in an L configuration. Just because of what that structure does to the HESCOs that are underneath. So we've got no problem with getting them out and that kind of thing, but essentially you're almost guaranteed to lose one road due to damage. I'm trying to think here. So in that particular area though, as the river rises, you'll see, and you probably did see this last time around, where we'll actually put some little little lines of flood protection in between streets. So in between Brady Street and the Radisson, for instance. And that's about at about 21 feet. We can do that at the Ground Transportation Center also. It's not required at the Ground Transportation Center until about 22.5 feet. And at that point, we're only placing it there so that we can actually get the buses in and out. You're gonna place them just before the entrances so that the buses can get in the facility and they can exit the facility. Anything else you wanna say about this? A lot of that particular protection in the Bethel Park area is what is helping us keep that Arsenal Bridge access open. Access to that 2nd and 3rd, 4th Street area. Go ahead.
Where River Drive goes underneath the Government Bridge, there is a storm / river pumping station that is owned and operated by Canadian Pacific. They use that to pump the depression so they can maintain their freight access through the river.
And then we'll go ahead and go down River Drive a little bit further. Okay, so we're at River Heritage Park, 3rd, 4th. So actually we are gonna keep, we will at higher levels, at 21-ish feet again. We've got a couple of magic numbers. It's like 18 and 21. You will find a lot of stuff that happens at some of those numbers. A lot of them is also 15 feet. So anyway, we've got that, you're gonna put something up so that you're gonna be able to keep LeClaire open off of 3rd Street. Again, we really didn't have an opportunity or need to do anything on 4th Street this year. We had several years ago actually put a barrier across River Drive near Federal to keep Federal open as a detour. It had been practiced probably 2 or 3 times over the last 15, 20 years or so. But what we found out, and one of the reasons that we do not do that protection anymore, is because the water's actually gonna come back up around this way anyway. And so they never found where we were actually being able to actually keep that intersection open longer than a couple of days. And so we discontinued doing that particular practice. You'll find a couple of areas like that in the city, kind of even thinking about Marquette. You know, why would we keep Marquette open for 2 days? You know, so again, we're being physically responsible for the resources we have available also. And then Oneida is probably the next spot. It's hard for me to read from this particular location. So Steve actually has some renters there, some tenants down there. And that, what type of facility is that again? It's the marina, thank you. Well, but you got the
sailing club,
the
and
crane,
the restaurant.
and so essentially at that particular location, we do actually have to well some different things. We do have to set some pumps. In our particular facility at that location, there is some flood proofing that needs to be done. It was recognized this year, where some electrical actually needs to be raised and some of our mechanicals need to be relocated, so that we don't really have to do much of anything else at that particular facility. And then I think we're ready for Mound. So Mound, oh yeah, maybe back it down to like 19. Okay, so basically at Mound, it's gonna be between that 19 and 20 foot time frame that we start to actually have, where we're gonna actually start to close the road, number one, but we're not gonna necessarily put those HESCOs up unless we're gonna be looking at river levels of that 20 and a half or 21 foot. Because it's unnecessary at a particular point in time. We just need to make sure that we've got a little bit of notice, and we'll go ahead and put those in there. The closing of River Drive, if you notice, Mound Street actually, it'll come through the storm drains at Mound Street, but we actually get it over east of that intersection, and water starts to come over the road first before it does in that particular intersection. And that we actually time with the city of Bettendorf, because at about 20 feet, they start having the same issues on their River Drive. And so we actually communicate with Bettendorf and say, hey, here's what we're thinking. Bettendorf's kind of over here saying, hey, here's what we are thinking. We coordinate the timing of whatever that closure is, so that we're both doing it at the same time and we have one message. And because you don't want, the worst thing that you can do when you've got floods or detours or anything like that is for us to close it, Bettendorf to not close it, and have people come from Bettendorf and be greeted by a, you can't go through. And having people like dart through residential neighborhoods and things like that just to get around. So again, that's one of the things that we do is we actually coordinate that closure of that particular location. And I think that's all of them.
And I think what we want to do, we're going to jump right into the next part of this, but I think part of the issue is, as you can see, this is a fairly complicated process. There's a lot of moving parts in this, and to that end, I'm going to turn it over to Fred. We're going to take a look at, and he'll outline your task. We're going to work in some groups around the table. But I think one of the things to take a look at is, you'll see as you impact one area, you impact other areas. And that's part of what we have to take a look at as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Fred, and we've got about another 45 minutes. Stay focused, and let's go.
Thanks, Mayor. Okay, so here's the deal. My job as a facilitator is A, to keep you on topic, B, to make sure we finish on time. So we were thinking about how to do that. If we stay in a big group, what I found is the extroverts are very happy to share their thoughts. And the introverts are sitting there thinking and not talking. So to overcome that, we're going to break into some small groups. We have a very short amount of time, but we are interested in your thoughts. Your thoughts as to what do we have to protect. We've got a good presentation, okay? And probably establish some priorities to this. So priority one would be those things that impact a significant portion of the populace. Corey mentioned water pollution treatment plant. If that goes down, it affects the town's upriver, 4 communities. Okay, that's significant. There's other things on here that the city considers critical. That's up to you to consider and give us your thoughts. So what do we need to protect? And then let's look at 3 levels of priority. Priority 1 being the one that impacts most of the significant portion of the populace. Priority 2 is somewhat less people are affected, priority 3 less than priority 2. Okay, does that make sense, first of all? And I think, again, the interest of time, I'd like to divide us into groups of probably 6, Mayor, if that's okay. Because I want to give you all a chance to talk. I don't want the groups to get too big. And secondly, I want to come back at the end and give each of you an opportunity to report on what your group came up with. Okay? We can capture these. If you write anything down, turn it in on a piece of paper. We'll put it all together and get it back to everybody. Okay? We're just not going to have time. We usually like to have you present everything you talked about. We write it up here, and then we talk about some more of them. In the interest of time. So let's just get into groups of 6, talk about what do you think needs to be protected, and eventually we're going to talk about to what level and whose responsibilities are these, and what are some of the solutions that we could pursue. All right, is that?
And I would think just like this group right here, just move around, because we, and by design, mixed people up when you were sitting there. So, so I think it's somewhat opportunity to do that. So maybe Jessica go with this group over here, maybe. And this will be the one, and then wrap it around over here to maybe Greg, I guess, or something. Or right here to Tim, and this one group over here to Anthony, and then, or maybe even go over to Kelly, and then the rest of the group can go. And if somebody want to get up, come around, we're not going to stay long, you can sit on this side, somebody sit there if you want, and
So
whatever works.
let's go to about 5 to 10. All right, 5 to 10.
And for the next meeting, there will be a bigger venue, so that's a gift. Where's Steve? He is?
I was very impressed with Sarah.
She's fantastic.
Yes, she is.
All right, brilliant. You're
And to help you all, this sheet, everyone has a copy of this in your group. You might want to use those as a bit of a cheat sheet to kind of get some sense of that, kind of areas beyond this.
What did I just
Aren't you Nicole?
I am.
I talked to you before the flood.
There you go.
I have a question for you then, because you're in charge of this. Basically, aren't you?
I'm going to be presumptuous. Kelly, would you be the recorder on the problem?
It's our biggest problem. We're driving west. It's a sewer system. I mean, they're much better. Well, it goes into our sewer, yeah. But it's much better than it used to be. Even the big ones?
Once you do that.
For the back row?
Okay, so we have a big project.
What you're trying to do right now is prevent the rainwater and flood water from getting into the sewer. I mean, you're doing a much better job. It's still from there.
Well, it was really large, 1930s.
That's us.
Yeah, so that project is,
We used to back up. This time we did not back up.
wow, that's significant.
Oh, yeah, big deal. So once we hit 20, then it opened back up again.
Good question just came up. What's 9 miles of riverfront from Bettendorf all the way to Utah?
Yeah, so we're going to
Street
kind of
Utah.
go through the 1930s. connect
Not the state of Utah.
that used us, and then refocus again.
When you say disconnect, you're going to move sewer lines or you move mine? Because I don't understand how, like, there's condos right next door to us, just to the north of us. They never have a problem. So they say.
Keep those in priority.
Yeah, and there's also the Green Hill Center right across the street.
have a minor burn already, so
How does water with You know, that's one question. They've been there longer than we have.
Yeah, I don't know.
Makes me wonder.
Yeah, and I don't know, I honestly, I know once we got that flash rain we got.
Oh, that's terrible. We got inundated.
Dozens of backups.
Yeah, we got.
And that's when they were trying to.
That's when it went to, I think they went to 20 foot on that one, didn't it?
Yeah, that's
Yeah, what's the day I got back from Florida? The minute I got off the plane. Because I wasn't supposed to go that high. It was. I think it was a Monday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember I got a call.
Yeah, it probably rained Sunday night into Monday.
We work in different departments, but we both supply energy, so water gets into the underground.
I know that manhole gets flowers in it.
And folks that are waiting or sitting watching us, if you have ideas of what your priority 1, 2, 3s are, write them down. This must be protected. It would be great if we protect this, and it would be really nice if we got to protect that. You know, we'll take that too, and we'll collect them all. We'll give them Samantha at the door, collect that as well if you want.
But we could, Mid-America's been preparing for this for it.
Wouldn't feel like I might have, but someday I might be.
Elevated hazardous transport. The poles typically are pretty review those and inspect those on a regular basis for replacement. Now, like Frederick Island, we had 4 or 5 poles down there. That was because of the streets coming out of the river like that.
We got to what, 20 minutes?
I don't anticipate that kind of action.
But you keep talking 24.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. I don't want to hit it. Why would we protect the mold?
Oh, the one there at 17 or Marquette,
No road accidents.
handles quite well.
This guy, he makes more money when he's closed than he does when he's open, doesn't he?
We also
You're not gonna stay there.
I know that. I will never.
and we're also in the middle of bringing double service.
Oh, okay.
So that they want that.
What about now Kamara built there? Is that all private? I mean,
About a third of West Half Florida.
for the water, yeah.
Because I know
I was sure they could do it. Because everybody else does.
When it gets that level, yeah.
That too, yes.
We have back door. We don't really have any.
They are some
That level, all of our low runs are like, there's no bedding on that.
the other side of that too. We do have all our substations.
Right, where we leave
That's
it.
why there was no floor. So it just doesn't take any piece to figure that one out. Yeah, I mean, all the way up and down. Hey, she put it down there, right?
The one sub-G downtown, was 6 foot, 7 sub-T, which is
And let the railroad pay for that.
So that is the call center where Illinois wants to
Down to the bedroom. It's all the way down to bedroom. railroads talk about crap.
They have a wall there now.
Sandbag walls?
They actually have, you can't really see it, it's making that much taller, so they have to build. Yeah, so, but they
I watched them from our roof. When the train comes through, they had about 8, 10 guys building, and they'd move all the things back down and push the train through and push it through. That was like,
our guys were not in the fight, they were all watching each other.
23, we have the George County spots.
he said they had pumps out there.
That was their fastest. Right, yeah. But now they're bringing the track.
So are they predicting more floods and higher floods? I mean,
It's funny, it's so there was some, I was on a collective through the university talking about climate, and one of their predictions is that years and years and years really going to criteria, and I talked to but obviously, yeah, well, it's not, but it's crazy because, you know, when you consider 100-year rainfall, they probably had 5 of them.
That's your golf game.
yeah, 3 inches. It seems like when it rains out, it's 4. I mean, it's like even 4.
Yeah, because we had it last year, we had it really bad on the memorial.
Really? That's what River's back up to 6.
That rain.
Now, if we had another one of those now, we'd be back up to 16 or so, right?
The problem is, right now, the
The voters shall decide.
It's a priority, but it's being
Anybody else want to chime in? Additional ones? Is there all other ones? You know how that goes.
You know, single cabin together?
It was like a big vacation one.
That's still a lot of people.
It was. 4 days later.
That's nice to be able to get away with it.
Well, they all have their documents, so a month ago, after we get
You weren't sure where you were going now, right? The way you were going.
Any questions? You've got hydrologists, weather service.
That's what would be expected.
Well, you told me that. During that first what's part of it? But this is that.
We were having our operation.
Take care of that. Take care of the post office. Take care of Marquette and so
Here's the level, and then we come down. It's not very 2030,
rallies. I mean, and on both sides.
Right, just like inflation, going up to down.
It's more than just what is
Only until Mother Nature makes you cry out, even when it's over.
Second state would be that if rivers shut down, the west coast.
That's, yeah, I think ultimately they could lower that one. Actually, shutting whatever right application. That's what you're driving. And then it's probably,
And they keep
I agree.
Well, then it did help with them showing the floods across the island before that, and everything. That's in there, everything else.
I'm 2 years later. So everywhere I work, standard.
deviate from the mission.
They
haven't asked that question. They want us to agree on what the priority is, and then we can talk about the how. So I'm going to pass on the how, although I have very specific thoughts.
If I could have your attention just for a minute, we're not done yet. But one thing that's not on your list, and I think we ought to at this point at least think about it, what about River Drive? You're all there discussing that? Okay, good. I want to just make sure everybody is playing on the same field. Talking about. So what about River Drive? How does that fit?
Solve a lot of issues.
Someday. There are other days, not so much.
What you doing outside, John? We did all right. I mean, it was we could walk around there. We had 14 colors. We had a couple slots that water in the walls. And that was the old coal room. So I closed the doors off in there because I thought that might give away. But we only said the doors. So I'm came in the cracks of all things up. So we had a lot of people coming through the sandbags through the door. You can see in the garage the water got really deep. We were able to be faster than this, which is pretty amazing. Are you
If I may
retired?
interrupt one more time.
Are you? You're about
I
to
know, I
stand
never
for
will slow you down. But
Is that right?
you're focusing rightfully so on what are our top priorities.
Yes.
What are some areas that you feel we don't need to protect, or we don't need to protect anymore? Are there any of those? You saw the map. Are there areas that no longer need to be protected, or we don't protect them as much as we did before? I'm just asking, throwing that out. If you're talking about the one, are there some others that we would change or do different? Just to throw it out for thought. It may not be, hopefully there's not, or at least some good plans to do it.
I don't think so either. But you should try to protect them. I don't remember that.
Yeah, I think empty.
Went to other.
Where are we going with this?
They allow me to sit down next to the coach.
There's a lot of people. I live just right.
You lost that 30 years ago.
Get backed up down there for offensive
Yeah, back in 65.
I would drive. I live there.
I have no idea what he's going to do. You get down,
Just what I saw. Black. I didn't hear any issues
Any other?
So nobody knew what to do when the flood came? So it was a reaction rather than.
Once you get past that, it's until you get to the city of
Doesn't have the whole thing. Doesn't have the whole thing.
That's my thought. We'll see what
That's a lot of people took that as affecting the business. I know it did, but that wasn't the idea. Why didn't you do that? Was it? They're waiting for answers. Why the heck is there? You know, we're over the water like almost to the top of them. I mean, then they start throwing sandbags on top of them. It's just playing with another row of them. You know what I thought was funny? During the whole flood, they put that wall around the wall around us. They hired Permar to sit out there and watch. 24/7 they had Permar sitting there watching that wall. And I said to one of the two guys, what are you doing here? He goes,
How are you?
good. He goes, $2,000, $2 million, just a balloon over there. Somebody come in and haul that out. That's the way to get that out. Especially when the water is all the way up to west, you know.
Well, okay, everybody. I understand you're probably not finished, but what I'd like to do is give each table an opportunity to give a summary of what you discussed. So no more than 5 minutes, so 5, 10, 15, 20, that puts us right at 5:30. If you wish to continue, I would encourage you to maybe exchange emails or you have them already? Okay, you can continue this discussion, and like the mayor's going to tell you, we're open to feedback anytime between now and this next session, which is 2 weeks. So totally up. So if you feel rushed, which I understand, maybe you can just continue the conversations over the next couple of weeks. Okay. So with that, let me turn to this table, and if you could give us a summary, that would be great. And what we're looking for, to see if there's any commonality, what those commonalities are.
All right, I'll do my best. Please fill in. So we said, so we're trying to answer the, what do we protect at what priority level, right? So we said, we believe that we should protect all 9 miles.
Good.
We struggled when we started to prioritize. So short-term, public critical infrastructure like wastewater, water, very important. But long-term, we can't pick between any of them. We believe that all should be protected equally in the long-term plan to include public infrastructure, residential, businesses, historical assets, all of those in the long-term plan should be protected equally along the 9 miles. We also then took geography into consideration. In a long-term plan, we don't believe that there should be any prioritization between the west side, village, East Davenport, or downtown. All, again, along those 9 miles should be equally protected. That was essentially what we got to, and then we also looked at prioritization in terms of, do you protect everything on the city side of the railroad? So we took River Drive as a conversation point and said, well, why not the railroad? Because if we use the railroad as a line of demarcation, you can partner with the railroad on a common solution possibly, since they're interested in protecting their asset too. We also had some disagreement though about whether or not it's the railroad, River Drive, or 2nd Street in Rockingham. But there was a line of demarcation at some point in time that we said we should protect all equally.
Any other comments? Bravo. Thank you, Paul. At the end, whatever you have, could you turn it in and we'll consolidate that and feed it back to you. Okay. Okay. Spokesperson here, please.
All right, so we took a little bit more pragmatic approach. We used the list provided from the slides and identified those things that were critical to the city as a whole, which includes critical assets like water pollution control plant, sewers, compost facility, things that are important to keep the entire city running, right? We have to have water, we have to have sewer, those things. Then we looked at things that affect businesses and residences that are in the direct line of the river. And streets had a high priority. We labeled these 1, 2, and 3, by the way. That first batch was all 1s, these are 2s. Streets had a priority with a caveat. We used the list of streets under the streets category below to include Arsenal Bridge, Centennial Bridge as number 1s. 3rd and 4th Street, 2nd Street, and East Village number 2s, and River Drive number 3. Modern Women Park, Redstone Ramp, Garden, Western Addition Berm, those things, Union Station, Freight House, those things that have businesses or people, we labeled them a number 2 priority. Everything else that they had to do with entertainment, leisure, parks, bike paths, things like that, we labeled them as a number 3, and probably many of those could go way down the list because they really need to be accessed during times of
Good, good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the rest of your group? Okay, thank you very much. Please.
Well, we started by identifying sort of those critical infrastructure things like pollution control plant, postal service, Modern Woodman, which the city has invested a tremendous amount in, access to the bridges. And then what we really got down to was, at the end of the day, we just think we should protect River Drive, because that speaks to protecting basically all the things that we were talking about. And also has the benefit of keeping us, instead of from a national news perspective, being closed as an entire city from people's perspective, they don't see that. So for us, keeping River Drive open actually became the priority. From there, looking westward, we identified a lot of places like Sears and the industrial park down there are built to withstand where the flooding is right now. So those are not necessarily areas that have to be protected, but identifying where the places that we can let the river breathe a little bit. So we're looking at 280 in some of those sections. There's a lot of space there that seems to environmentally work to breathe, and those we would keep as lower priorities because we're sort of already living with the river pretty well down there.
Any other comments from the group? Okay, thank you.
We had a
lot of commonality with the previous groups, for sure. In our priority one, we put the water pollution control plant and all the associated sewer infrastructure, lift stations, and there's a lot of work to be done there. Within priority one, we kept the interstate traffic, so the Centennial and Government Bridge and the associated are definitely priority one. The streets listed, we kind of bumped to priority two. We included River Drive as a whole in our priority two. We thought it was important to protect the commercial and the industrial infrastructure there, and to add that to the protected list. Likewise, the recreational parks, the bike trails, boat launches, that's clearly priority three. Probably not going to prioritize. There's a lot, I think, on River Drive that needs to be included in priority two. And exactly where you put that, whether or not it currently has protection, is something that really needs to be discussed. There's a lot of investment along River Drive that needs to be prioritized.
If I may clarify, Colonel, if you would, the access to the bridges, does that then, the associated roads lead to the bridges?
Right. The approaches to the bridges, the bridges are out of order, but you can't get to them there.
So second, third, getting on or off the bridges. Just to, okay, I just want to clarify.
Any other comments from the group? Any thoughts after you've heard all the groups? Anybody want to comment on things they've heard? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just one thing that came up here too that we talked about was, it's not just about protecting the front because the back is what'll get you, right, Rick?
Correct.
So it's the sewer, it's all of that, and it's being practical about that, which is why we kind of didn't choose River Drive. That was one of the reasons, because of thinking about that is very important, what comes up from the storms and things like that.
Yeah, our discussion.
The inundation and stuff.
Oh, I'm sorry. Our discussion led to the sewers where they're behind the walls and flooding out and actually doing all the work that they need big pressure.
Yeah, I'd add to that, that entire watershed for Davenport should be considered. All the creeks and tributaries that flow in, that are up, and all the creeks, and so we should be thinking about that.
The creek, Blackhawk, yeah.
Interior drainage, in a fully built out system, the interior drainage, because it's an ordinance system, it wouldn't be put up and protected on the front facing river. You can't avoid that flat flood behind the wall.
Okay. Just a reminder, please turn in when we dismiss, so we can capitalize on all three.
If you have, even if individuals beyond, I know Tim did his, so if Tim has his notes, but if anybody else has even notes that weren't necessarily the one who did the report out person, turn them in if you're willing to do that. Or we can get a copy, you can keep your notes and we'll have those. But I think it'd be good to capture all that information. I would then ask, again, thanks Fred. Fred will be here for the duration of this. We'll have other topics going along. But I think as we talk about all the people that were here, you know all of these folks, or us. So if you have other ideas, don't hesitate to write them down and turn those in and give us some more ideas. It's building information over the next set of meetings to get to a decision as we're talking about of what actually happens. You know, we've got the postmaster here. Obviously, that's another issue that comes up. Yes, sir.
Can I ask you a question? You talk about the 9 miles. What 9 miles are we talking about? From where to where? I don't know where the 9 miles are.
It starts at Bettendorf border all the way to Utah.
You wouldn't have to protect all 9 miles.
I know, but I didn't say that. One group did. And it all depends on what that means. I think what I would assume, good question, I would assume one of the steps as we move forward is what are the many options to do all the things we want to have done. So it's not going to be one option. I think it's going to have to be a series of options from over the 9 miles, because some people might need work on Garden Addition levee that's there. You know, maybe that's part of it, but maybe there's something else on the eastern part. Maybe there's something else. And again, I think Credit Island, we at Credit Island took a step already, moving everything up. When it floods, we wash it out and start again. You know, fix a little part of the road and go on. So there's a lot of options that we're going to face. But I think it's the idea is to get everything on the table of what the possibilities are. We'd love to keep it all operational if we could. And again, I would ask, as you, all this group, but other people as well. Tell your neighbors what we're going through, and let's talk about it more during the next 2 weeks. I just want to give you a little heads up or primer of what we're going to do. I don't know pressure, Ray, but Ray Wolf from the NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, is going to give us some idea. The next thing is going to come up to what level. You know, we're talking 21, 22 feet. Do we need to start talking at 26 feet or whatever that happens to be? We also have not only from the National Weather Service, and we work with Jessica all the time during this whole process, but also she's a hydrologist, and you've been talking about all those issues of the water coming underneath. So it's a matter of it, not just what comes down, it's what you can keep from the wall, but also what comes underneath. We had a section of River Drive where the wall was, the temporary protection was there and was holding, but a part of River Drive started buckling up. We had to come with a load of sandbags and push it back down so it didn't blow a hole in it. So there's a lot more to it than just what you protect on a wall and or temporary protection. And of course we have Colonel Sattinger here and of course Dennis as well from the Corps' perspective. So that's the next thing, is at what level, and then what are the other organizations? I was on the conference call in my role as co-chair of the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative, hosted a national conference call, about 100 on it, about 60 mayors and all the organizations represented. We need to find out, we're talking about what a wall means and can you do it? Will the federal government, will the Corps of Engineers, will FEMA allow you to build, and what will they allow you to build, and what will they support? So those are some questions we'll be answering. But next week, the next 2 weeks, we're going to continue, wrap this up here, get a little more, and I think we made some good progress here today. Some of it was reiteration. I was talking to Alderman Mattson before. Some of it's reiteration of what we've been doing. But we want to know, I want to leave, everybody leave here today, that the best thing what we do in the past, it'll be better next time. Because our city administrators committed to it, all of the staff are committed to it, and all of us, we want to learn from what we've learned and do better next time. And that each step should be better. They're going to review that whole plan, all the sheets and sheets of it. So we be ready, because before this grand plan can come to light, we're going to have some more flooding. You know, so we need to be prepared that we can keep everybody back where they want to get back into where they're going, and find out ways, if you've been impacted, how can we help you minimize that impact in the short run before a longer plan can come in place. Okay, so again, I want to thank you all for being here. Please give us all the information you can and the feedback that you can. I thank you all for being here. Thank those that reported out for us today. I know that was a voluntold situation, so I thank you for that. But again, have a wonderful week. But let's keep talking about it. Let's keep talking about it in the community, pass these words out, and let everybody know. So we'll see you. And you can leave your name placards here. We'll collect them for you and give them back to you. Again, thank you all for being here. Thanks for
Your buddy's just like mine. Yes, it was. Right.
Nice talking to you.
Sorry, I was gonna turn off the video camera.
Nice talking to you. I'm John Little.
Yes, we met at the Thank you guys for coming here. Wonderful.
Thanks for putting up with us right now.
So all those things, all 6 of the things I just mentioned, nowhere in our plan. So we got to do that. No revenue. None of the other things could be helpful. So it's good to see you. Then I drove The one time we thought we were going to get a little bit of money, was when August 19th was going to play. The Dodgers. Ballpark doesn't really mind those baseball stadiums. And the reality was, they're 8 hours away, and they didn't want to pay for the bus. You know, even Clinton, like Clinton, tried to steal. that one series anchor line. They try to take that from us. They just sit there and go, try to take away games from a team that's already lost. They did. The league stopped. No, because the league is really all the other teams. And the other teams always sit there and go, thank you so much.
I'd rather interview Shawnee first.
It'll be a long time until we finally start. Ramped up.
Hey, I want to thank you.
Look, Kathy, how are you? Glad to see that you're on the committee.
You said when I turned we're the bad. I don't care about set the bar in the positive side.
See you right now.
See ya.
You might just talk to you real quick about it. I'll check on it.
Good, how you doing? But yeah, so then we went to. I'm doing fantastic.
Yep.
No, I don't think so. I jump over.
This is a terrible room.
I know, we're trying to make it look as nice.
So when we have meetings, I have facing this way. I don't get my grants. This weird just ears in my head. We have me and you go stuff.
Well, it's good for them, because they're gonna look for somewhere to go.
Yeah, and it wasn't good for you guys to stand there for so long.
Right.
I imagine you won't have as much media next single
If you're having people from the public too. Right.
Yeah, you want it to be
I know.
comfortable. Kyle Drip, KYLE, Alderman Eller.
I mean, it's all been pretty exciting. Everyone's still talking about it. And how do you feel about
I think it was a really good start. So today, we looked at prioritizing the infrastructure and assets of the city into 3 different tiers. What are those tiers that need to be protected? Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. After we broke off into small groups and after hearing the 4 different groups report out, it sounded like there was a lot of consensus and these are vital community infrastructure like the water treatment plant, the water pollution plant, sewers, the bridges, making sure that we still have access to the Centennial Bridge and the National Bridge. And then the second tier kind of broke down to streets and then investments, whether they be commercial, residential, or industrial investments. And then the third tier was kind of amenities, parks, and other things like that. And there seemed to be agreement there. So that was priority 1 today, which was what assets do we want to protect and let's prioritize.
how we go from ideas here and then meetings implementing? I don't know if you guys do council votes or is it more city staff?
Well, yeah, so I think what's really key here is you have a representation, 21 to 22 people who have an interest in the city of Davenport and an interest in flood protection. And we want to set the direction of here's what we protect, here's what we want to protect, here's at what level we want to protect it, and then there's going to have to be professionals that put that together and say, if you want to protect this asset at this level, here's the cost to it. And then the professionals will put that comprehensive plan together, and eventually, yes, that has to be brought back to Riverfront Improvement Commission as well as the city council, and then of course you have to figure out how are you going to fund that.
We're obviously looking at a very lengthy process, really big plan, we're talking about all these things earlier. How do you feel thinking about trying to go through all that and make it the right
These are tough decisions. That's why I want to make sure that this group is leaning on our technical experts, our hydrologists, the folks who are Corps of Engineers, people who understand the river navigation, so that the technical experts are giving us a plan. Now, as far as execution of the current plan, as the mayor said, we will have a flood again, and probably before we're able to implement an entirely new plan. So you also have to say, what is our current plan, what changes are we going to make in the short term, so that if we have a flood in January, we're better protected in January than we were in May.
Any ideas, timeline?
Well, yeah, so the execution area is probably, this is something that you do. This group meeting, I think the mayor is committed to these outward areas he wants to make sure that this thing is at the clear and by the end of the year. So I think by January, this group would hopefully have given the direction and what that looks like after that. I'm not sure. Yeah, that's what I would expect.
We're probably lucky that we don't get by cheaply as we do.
Nope, I think we're good.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. A nice sunny day it looks like to go out and explore.
Yeah.
21.
One night of the week I don't have anything, so I'm gonna go.
Nice.
I was the only